after his death at the age of 84.
He never stopped. I once said to him, "You already in history. You've gotten all the honors. Why do you keep going?" He said, "I never learned how to retire."
Kind words too from Donald Trump, though he also used his tribute to take aim at America's first black president. Barack Obama, in his own tribute, praised Jesse Jackson for helping to lead some of history's biggest movements. We'll speak to those who knew Jesse Jackson best to look at his legacy at a time when much of what he fought for is under attack. Also ahead, hints of optimism after new talks involving the US and Iran. That clashes with the threats and actions from both sides in and around one of the world's most important shipping routes.
Of course, a warship is a dangerous device, but more dangerous than that is a weapon that can send that warship deep under the sea.
That wasn't the only diplomacy America's been involved with today in Geneva, mediating the latest round between Russia and Ukraine. That's as Russia moves out of the cold in world sport with its ban lifted for the Winter Paralympics in Italy. All that and more ahead on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening and welcome to the programme. He was one of the last people to speak to Martin Luther King Jr. before his assassination in 1968. And the Reverend Jesse Jackson would spend his life over the following decades as the successor of his mentor's civil rights movement. Tonight, after his death at 84, Jackson is being remembered as a movement unto himself by his protege, Al Sharpton, who says his fight goes on.
We are seeing at a stage where everything he fought for is at risk. And if we want to mourn him, we've got to preserve what he fought for.
So what now for Jesse Jackson's legacy in the Trump era, which many in the civil rights movement consider to be a dangerous moment for US democracy? We'll begin with this report from our US correspondent, David Blevins.
We must never surrender. We must go forward.
Articulate, impassioned, electrifying. He was the man who opened the door, the first African-American to run for president of the United States.
Let's be bigger and better as a nation.
His campaign speeches emboldening the marginalized.
Hold your head high. Stick your chest out. You can make it. It gets dark sometimes, but the morning comes. Don't you surrender. We must never surrender. America will get better and better. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive.
The son of a single mother from Greenville, North Carolina, he grew up in a deeply segregated southern community and became a protege of Martin Luther King Jr., witnessing his assassination firsthand and inheriting his mantle.
Jesse Jackson changed American politics. Jesse Jackson changed the civil rights movement. He was a consequential and transformative figure.
It was a lifetime of organizing. He became a voice for the voiceless. Black Americans, women, the gay community, and the poor.
The richest nation in the history of the world.
Jesse Jackson ran for president twice, changing US politics forever. He didn't win. It paved the way for the first black man who did.
Change has come to America.
It was in many ways the fulfillment of his hopes. They did have a complicated relationship. Jackson, a prophetic voice of challenge. Obama, more focused on building a coalition for change. In a statement, President Obama said his wife Michelle got her first glimpse of political organising at the Jacksons' kitchen table, adding, "We stood on his shoulders." President Trump posted numerous photos of him with Reverend Jesse Jackson on his social media site and wrote, "Despite the fact that I am falsely and consistently called a racist by the scoundrels and lunatics on the radical left, Democrats all, it was always my pleasure to help Jesse along the way." He emerged from the long shadow of Martin Luther King Jr., their combined legacy having carved a path for generations.
People got to realize that they were worth more because of the speeches that he gave.
It showed that it doesn't matter what our skin color is or where we're from. that we all have innate talents that we're given and that we are all the same.
We can dream as much as we want and we can achieve what we dream of. Yeah.
One of the last towering figures of the struggle for equality has gone. And for Jesse Jackson, there can only be one epitaph.
Keep hope alive.
Report by our David Blevinson. David joins us live from Washington. I mean, David, he, of course, was an icon, but also a complex figure.
Yes, an iconic figure, a complex figure, the product of his own childhood, really. Yalda, he was the son of a single teenage mother. His father was an older neighbour. He grew up in this deeply segregated southern community, a community where white children took the bus to school and black children had to walk alongside. And all of that, I suppose, is what motivated him to become involved in the civil rights movement in the first place. But he certainly didn't get everything right. He apologised for making what was deemed at the time to be an anti-Semitic remark during the presidential election campaign. Many people think that's what cost him the White House, but I think in reality it just wasn't his time. It wasn't America's time. The United States had to wait another 2 decades before the first African-American won a presidential election. So complex, yes, but it doesn't take away from the fact that he has certainly claimed his place in the recent history of America.
Yeah, indeed. And but given that racial inequality still exists in the way that it does in the United States, what is his legacy?
I think there are two. There is a global legacy because once that presidential campaign was over, later in life he was involved in negotiating the release of hostages in places like Syria and Cuba and Iraq, so earned his place on the global stage, but will ultimately, I think, be remembered for the contribution he made to the cause of civil rights here in the United States. Jesse Jackson didn't replace Martin Luther King Jr. No one could, but he simply refused to let the movement die. He was organised, he was motivated, he refused to be silent. And now I suppose that torch passes to a new generation, now that another towering figure of the civil rights movement has gone, because the cause remains. The formal structures of segregation in this country have long gone, but the patterns that shaped that remain. How often is racism still a question mark over the United States of America, particularly its recent politics? And for that reason, I think people can only hope that someday the dream that Jesse Jackson kept alive will become a reality for people here in the United States of America and across the world.
David, as always, thank you so much. Well, Mark Morial is the President and Chief Executive of the National Urban League. Thank you so much, Mr. Morial, for joining us here this evening. He is being described, obviously, as a historical force to be reckoned with. President Obama described him as a giant to be mourned. How would you like to remember Jesse Jackson tonight?
So thank you for having me. As a transformative figure. So he had unique, I think, a unique contribution to American life. One thing is that he kept the flame of Martin Luther King alive, not by himself, but as probably the most prominent civil rights leader in America in the 1970s and the 1980s. Secondly, he transitioned to electoral politics, which was something that many thought he nor anyone could effectively do. His 1984 candidacy for president was brilliant in that, on one hand, he challenged the leadership of the Democratic Party. On the other hand, he offered a stinging critique of Reaganomics, which was devastating Black communities and urban communities at the time. And thirdly, he beat all expectations in that campaign. He won primaries, he raised money, he got delegates, and in both of those candidacies, he stayed in the race all the way through the convention. That's a unique role that he played. He paved the way for Doug Wilder as governor of Virginia through his registration efforts, David Dinkins as mayor of New York, Bill Clinton as president of the United States, and certainly Barack Obama, as many have commented, because of his effectiveness in registering people to vote in the late 1980s and expanding the electorate. So his contributions are unique. For me, he represented a role model. I was an 84 and 88 Jackson delegate to the Democratic National Convention, and watching him inspired my own political career in the 1990s.
Yeah, it feels, and it has been said, that in many ways he was a bridge between generations, because when you talk about 1984 or 1988, I guess many people forget just how raw, the events of the 60s still was, not just for him, but for an entire generation. So, as you say, to sort of lay the groundwork in the way that he did at a time when perhaps America wasn't ready, but he managed to get as far as he did in such an extraordinary way.
Consider the fact that when he ran for president, he was in his early 40s. When Dr. King tragically was assassinated, he was in his 20s. So Jesse began his career as a young activist, and in that, he was a role model for a generation of young people. He had swag, he had style, he had charisma, he had relatability to an emerging generation in the 1970s and the 1980s. And while people now have looked at him over the years as more of a senior or elder statesman, the Jesse Jackson that I remembered as a teenager was a young man that was relatable, given his style and given his substance. So we've got to hope that his career is an inspiration to this next generation that wants to impact social justice, civil rights, and economic opportunity in this nation. And I'm confident it will.
And when you look back on all of those issues, because he championed so many issues domestically, internationally, what do you think he would want for his legacy or lasting legacy to be? How do you think that he would want to be remembered?
I think he would want to be remembered as the quintessential public servant, that his aim was to make America a better place for everyone. I think he really relished the idea of the Rainbow Coalition. I think he really relished the idea that while he was a champion for Black America, he was a champion for America's future as a multiracial democracy. And I think he'd want to be remembered significantly in that fashion. I think for many of us, we remember him as a role model. We remember him as a drum major.
Mark Morial, thank you so much for joining us here this evening. Well, while America mourns, its diplomats have been busy in Geneva negotiating two crises at once. US envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, attended indirect negotiations with Iran before crossing town to mediate between Ukraine and Russia. The Ukrainian and Russian negotiators wrapped up for the day a little earlier and will gather again tomorrow. Previous rounds have ended with no major breakthrough, and there are few signs so far it's any different this time round. Well, the US-Iran talks, though, appeared more positive. The two sides say they've reached an understanding on guiding principles in efforts to resolve their long-running nuclear dispute. Still, expectations aren't high, as our international correspondent Dominic Waghorn reports.
The messaging from Iran is anything but subtle. Take us on and you'll face this. Missile attacks in one of the world's most strategic waterways, with global oil supply the target. If there was any room for doubt, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, rammed the point home.
They keep saying the US have sent warships towards Iran. OK, of course, a warship is a dangerous device, but more dangerous than that is a weapon that can send that warship deep under the sea.
None of this is putting off the US, amassing a huge amount of military force in the same stretch of sea a few hundred miles south of Iran. The Straits of Hormuz, through which a fifth of the world's oil supply passes, where the Iranians have been carrying out exercises and where the USS Lincoln aircraft carrier strike group is now in place. Further west, the US has deployed more warplanes and other military assets in bases in Qatar, Bahrain, the UAE, Kuwait and Jordan. US President Donald Trump is telling Iran to make a deal or else.
I would say they're bad negotiators because we could have had a deal instead of sending the B-2s in to knock out their nuclear potential, and we had to send the B-2s. I hope they're going to be more reasonable. They want to make a deal.
President Trump wants a deal on Iran's alleged nuclear weapons project, its ballistic missiles program, its support of proxies across the region, and its treatment of its own people. Thousands are thought to have died in a brutal crackdown on nationwide protests last month. The Iranians are in a tight spot, threatened by more unrest and economic meltdown. So they may choose to play for time, emerging from the latest talks in Geneva, sounding positive.
A new window of opportunity has opened, under which we had the second round of the negotiations with the United States earlier today here in Geneva. We are hopeful that negotiation will lead to a sustainable and negotiated solution which can serve the interest of relevant parties and the broader region.
But the signals from Tehran look less conciliatory. There is no sign of significant progress on the major issues. Without it, President Trump is still threatening to strike Iran. And he's putting in place just the kind of firepower he will need to do so. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News.
Well, Inés de la Cuetera, MS Now international reporter, is in Geneva and has more about how today's talks went. Have a listen.
Good evening, Yalda. Yeah, a big day of diplomacy here in Geneva as the U.S. held talks on both Iran and Ukraine. When it comes to Iran, those talks were held at the Omani ambassador's residence. The U.S. and Iran never actually came face to face because these were indirect talks. So instead, they met privately with the Omani foreign minister who mediated the negotiations, just as he did during the last round of talks a couple weeks ago in Oman. It was the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and the special envoy, Steve Witkoff, who led the U.S. delegation. On the Iranian side, it was the Iranian foreign minister leading that delegation. Now, the talks went on for roughly 3.5 hours, and we were there as the delegations left the residence. I will say things got a bit heated at one point. There were Iranians in exile who were there protesting, yelling out at the American delegation, "Why do you negotiate with terrorists?" In terms of what was actually said, so we did get a first readout from the Iranian side. They put a rather positive spin on things. So they said that in this round, compared to the previous one, completely serious discussions were raised, and there was a more constructive atmosphere. They went on to talk about how they had been able to reach a general agreement on a set of guiding principles that they plan to use to move forwards toward drafting the text of a potential agreement. But we got a more nuanced readout from the American side, so a U.S. official telling us that progress was made, but there are still a lot of details to discuss. The Iranians said they would come back in the next 2 weeks with detailed proposals to address some of the gaps in our positions. Now, in the afternoon, the Americans then went on to meet with the Ukrainians and the Russians. In that case, it was a trilateral discussion, so all three delegations met in the same room. We did hear from the Ukrainian side earlier this evening that, suggesting that there could be possibly another round of talks tomorrow, that negotiations could continue tomorrow. But in terms of what was actually said, we didn't get a whole lot of details. We did get some details at the Munich Security Conference when Secretary of State Marco Rubio talked about how they had pretty much narrowed the issues down to just a few issues, but that he said those were the most difficult to resolve. He didn't get into what those issues are, but we know in the past, of course, the big sticking points have been security guarantees and the issue of territory, specifically who would get to control the Donbass. We also heard from the Ukrainian President Zelensky in recent days talking about how the U.S. has too often asked the Ukrainians to make concessions and not Russia. He is pushing for viable security guarantees, and he is, saying they're going to do everything to end the war, but they need security guarantees. And worth pointing out that, of course, this month will mark 4 years since the beginning of the war.
That was Inés de la Cuetera from MS Now. Well, joining us now is former senior U.S. diplomat Alan Eyre, Distinguished Diplomatic Fellow at the Middle East Institute. Thank you so much, Mr. Eyre, for joining us here on the programme. So we're hearing now, or we have throughout the day, the Iranians putting quite an optimistic spin on this, the United States a little bit more nuanced. What are your key takeaways from what we're seeing?
Yalda, I think what we're hearing is sort of the de minimis in terms of platitude. If successful negotiations are climbing a mountain, this just means that they've met at base camp. We have so much more to go that I'm glad we got this far, but yeah, really, my overall outlook is still relatively negative, and any final agreement is predicated on the U.S., I think, scaling back its red lines, because it's clear that the Iranians aren't going to.
Yeah, I mean, we heard from the Vice President, J.D. Vance, tonight saying that there are still red lines that the Iranians aren't willing to meet as yet. The question is, are the United States, are the Israelis going to be patient enough to wait? Because it does feel like déjà vu, like we've been here before. The last time we saw these negotiations break down, B-2 bombers were sent to destroy their nuclear facilities.
Excellent point. I think you have to differentiate between U.S. goals and Israeli goals. Israeli goals, they want to attack, or they want the U.S. to attack. They want someone to attack. They want to get rid of Iran's missile program. They want to get rid of its proxy network, and they want to fundamentally cripple the Islamic Republic of Iran so it can't project power. For the U.S., as J.D. Vance said, it seems the primary goal is, in fact, preventing Iran from having a nuclear weapon. But they're adding on other things like missiles, like proxies. And so if, in fact, the U.S. miscalculates and thinks that because Iran is weaker, they can ask for more, I think that just makes it more likely we're going to see military action.
Because what we're hearing, and it could just be rhetoric, to appease a domestic audience, the Ayatollah is digging his heels in. I mean, what we heard from him today, where he talked about sinking U.S. ships to the bottom of the ocean and you can't take on our regime. And then obviously his top diplomat almost playing good cop versus bad cop. That's kind of one point. But then again, when I've spoken to Israeli security establishment today, they're saying, the winds of war is back, which means that everyone seems to have their own agenda in this.
You're totally correct. Both sides are bellicose to the nth. Ayatollah Khamenei is a one-trick pony. He doesn't do good cop. All he does is bad cop. And the U.S., as we see, is amassing greater and greater military might. But at this point, we're way past diminishing returns. Each side is fully aware of the fact that the other is perfectly willing to engage in military action. Neither side wants it, but both sides are preparing for it. The question is, it's very easy to start a war. President Trump can do that with the touch of a button. Ending it is a lot harder, so at least on the terms you're looking for.
I guess I wonder if we could see the same playbook as last summer, where the negotiations were taking place, and then in many ways Israel did what Israel will do, and they will act unilaterally, and then the Americans sort of almost followed.
That could well be the case. Israel could decide to initiate action in the hopes that the U.S. will have its back. The difference between last time and now is because Iran has lost so much of its strategic deterrence, it's going to go all in on a response. It's not going to do a measured response. It's going to fire with a lot of what it's got. It's got a very wide target set. And that doesn't even include terrorist action. So whereas before we could count on a proportionate Iranian response, or indeed a performative Iranian response, as they did last time, I don't think, or at least I hope, there's no doubt in CENTCOM's mind and in President Trump's mind that to try to reestablish strategic deterrence, Iran is going to be much more aggressive if attacked.
So you're saying that this time round, the Iranians have tested the waters and, frankly, they don't have anything to lose?
Yeah, to an extent, I think they're in it for the long game. The Iranians realize that without U.S. boots on the ground, the U.S. cannot do regime change from the air. So the Iranians have proven they can take a punch. What they're counting on, if attacked, is inflicting so much harm on the U.S. and to an extent, possibly its regional proxies, that the U.S. pulls out and says, okay, that's enough. Okay? So, yeah, I think Iran, because they're so weak strategically, realize that they have to respond with a really excessive, violent display of force if attacked, even in a one-off attack.
You know, I've spoken to officials who were very much involved in the detail of the last nuclear deal, the one that Donald Trump tore up, the JCPOA that came into effect in 2015. There was so much that went into the detail. Doesn't feel like this time round they're going deeper into the detail. And yet last time, you know, what we've seen since then was that because the verification process broke down, they reached 60% enrichment. Are you concerned that there aren't those guardrails this time in whatever these negotiations are? There isn't that attention to detail. And we're seeing, you know, Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff negotiating almost two different things at once today in Geneva, and they're not paying attention to the detail that's required here.
You're quite right. I was part of the U.S. nuclear negotiating team for 5 years, from 2010 to the conclusion. And that was a detailed text. We had teams of experts. We had a very deep bench led by Bill Burns and Wendy Sherman. The Secretary of State came in as needed. So that's not the case now. Both Mr. Kushner and Mr. Witkoff are impressive individuals in their own right, but I'm hoping they have the bench strength to fill in the details. Having said that, it's clear that this administration, much like any U.S. administration, to an extent has strategic, attention deficit disorder. It's not looking for a big, thick draft text. It's looking for something a couple of pages along the lines of the 20-point Gaza peace plan. So the good news is, I think this U.S. administration would be satisfied with a much leaner, shorter, less detailed document than the Obama administration was. But even that's going to require experts.
Alan Eyre, fascinating talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Yalda.
You're watching The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Still to come on the programme. World Sport thaws on Russia, why the country's athletes will be allowed to perform under their flag at the Paralympics.
Well, hello, and thank you for watching The Wrap. Every night of the week, we will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why.
Just cannot stand. Stupid thing to do.
He did know what he was doing. You can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable?
What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree.
And laughs along the way.
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap.
Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
You're watching The World. Russia is set to have athletes competing under their own flag at the Paralympic Games for the first time since 2014. Russia was first banned in 2016 for state-sponsored doping and again over the Ukraine war. It's a significant move in from the cold and follows remarks by the FIFA chief, Gianni Infantino, who told me 2 weeks ago that Russia's world football ban should be lifted. Have a listen.
This ban has not achieved anything. It has just created more frustration and hatred with girls and with boys. And I feel that having girls and boys from Russia being able to play football games in other parts of Europe would help.
That was Gianni Infantino speaking to me there a couple of weeks ago. Well, let's bring in our sports correspondent, Rob Harris. And Rob, you and I discussed that at the time, those remarks made by Gianni Infantino, and we'll get to the wider move in a moment. But just first talk us through what's happened today.
Well, this really is the start of Russia's sporting exile starting to end. On the big stage, there will be 6 Russian athletes able to compete at the Paralympics in Milan Cortina next month under their own flag. They'll be at the opening ceremony, marching out with the Russian flag. We've heard that from Moscow tonight. Also, they'll be able to compete for medals and be on the podium and potentially have that Russian anthem playing. This hasn't happened since 2014 when Russia hosted the Sochi Games. It was later discovered that there was a state-sponsored systematic doping scheme underway to cheat the system to win medals. And that led to the Olympics and the Paralympics bringing in these bans in the Paralympics and the Olympics. The only Russians who could then compete were as neutrals, not officially under their own flag. Then, as the Paralympics was about to lift the ban, came the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. That led to Paralympics officials banning Russia entirely from the Beijing Winter Olympics in March 2022. But we've seen since then perhaps moving away from these bans, and it was in September that the International Paralympic Committee decided to lift the ban. It seemed to be maybe too late to get athletes in, but now they have granted these 6 wildcard places so athletes can compete in Italy.
Rob, and as I said, do you want to talk us through the sort of wider move? Because we heard Gianni Infantino talking about wanting to lift the ban when it came to football. But are we starting to see this thaw across the board?
Well, what the Paralympics chief, Andrew Parsons, told me towards the end of last year was the reason they decided to lift the ban was because they believed that Russian athletes were no longer using sport to promote the war. Now, that has been disputed, including by the UK government. The Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, telling the IPC tonight to urgently reconsider lifting this ban. They say it sends out a terrible message allowing them to compete. Volodymyr Zelensky just yesterday introduced new sporting-related sanctions on Russian officials, believing that he's concerned that there's an attempt to roll back justice, believing that Russia needs to stay isolated. But we have heard from Gianni Infantino speaking to you that he believes the ban isn't working because the war continues, and yet Ukraine believes that this aggression does need to be punished. Things are clearly shifting. The IOC are indicating a return for Russia by the time of the LA Games in 2028. President Kirsty Coventry believing that sport should not be political. She wants to depoliticise the Olympic movement. But things are only going to get more heated maybe in the coming months, including in football, because just last week, Ireland, who've been advocating for Israel to be banned from football, were drawn against Israel in the UEFA Men's Nations League competition. That match isn't until October, but already in Ireland, a huge outcry, pressure on football officials in Ireland to boycott the match, something that isn't happening. And it just shows, as long as this war continues, it creates that challenge for sports, whether or not they get involved, whether they're imposing their own sanctions. But at the Paralympics in a few weeks, we will see Russian athletes back.
Rob, thank you so much for that update. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, you make your bed, you lie in it. Australia's Prime Minister explains why he won't help women and children get home from Syrian camps linked to ISIS.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Richard and Frost.
Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Next on The World, developments in a story we brought you last night about the fate of women and children linked to suspected ISIS fighters in Syria. Tens of thousands of those women and children were once held in Al-Hol camp in northeastern Syria. Now a Syrian government official has told Sky News the camp is mostly empty, acknowledging escapes continued after the state took control of the site from Kurdish forces last month. About 25 miles away from Al-Hol is Al-Roj camp, which also houses ISIS-linked people, but is still controlled by Kurdish forces. Yesterday, dozens of Australian women and children from 11 families tried to leave to return to their home country. But Syrian authorities ordered them back to the camp, saying there were procedural problems with their departure. If they were hoping for any help from Australia's government to get them home, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has made it clear there won't be. While he isn't blocking their return, Mr Albanese says they're on their own, adding, "You make your own bed, you lie in it." Sky correspondent Nicole Johnson has more from Sydney.
Australia's ISIS brides are being refused repatriation. What does it mean? Well, this is a tricky one. Australian women who travelled to Syria to join Islamic State now want to come home, but the government isn't helping them.
Well, we won't repatriate them. My mother would have said, if you make your bed, you lie in it. These are people who went overseas supporting Islamic State.
The group tried to leave the camp on Monday by bus to reach Damascus, but after a couple of hours, they were turned back by the Syrian authorities. The women first travelled to Syria with their partners and joined Islamic State over a decade ago. But since the terrorist group was defeated, the Australians have been in one of either two camps in the north of the country. And bringing them back is a really contentious issue here, especially after the Bondi terrorist attack. And that's because the two gunmen had Islamic State flags with them. And the police say that they were inspired by the terrorist group. In 2022, Australia's previous government repatriated 4 mothers and 13 children from one of the camps. But this time round, the government says it won't be helping them. Organisations like Save the Children say that bringing them home is the moral and legal thing to do. But it's a political headache for the government, with the leader of Australia's far-right party, One Nation, using it as part of their anti-Muslim rhetoric.
Nicole Johnson reporting there. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, we'll return to the life and legacy of the civil rights giant after his death at the age of 84. I'll speak to another of his friends, the Pastor Jamal Bryant.
It's like a football final with only one team on the pitch. This isn't just a call to vote, but a call to remember. The freedom fought for by the African National Congress. I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. A cyclone and 2 burst dams wiped out hundreds of generational homes. This was the second dam that the floodwaters hit before it tore into Derna. We are in the heart of Nairobi, and we're watching as protesters were heavily tear-gassed.
The sheer fearlessness and persistence of these guys is astonishing.
We help you understand the world with us. I remember going into the iconic Omdurman market in the heart of Sudan's capital for the first time since the war started. And this is what's left of it. Bullet holes through buildings, shelled balconies, bullet cases on the floor. I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories and the lives of millions of people. This is insane. This was a bustling residential area. So many friends who lived here. My most memorable interview was with a 15-year-old boy who'd survived being stranded on a migrant boat on its way from Senegal to the Canary Islands.
After 13 days, our food, water and fuel supply ran out.
I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky News.
Liberation Day.
By popular demand, here we are.
Donald Trump. It is quite the story. Wherever it goes, on Trump 100, we go with it.
Can you tell us who you're looking for?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
Are you overstating the reach and significance of this deal?
Not like you said it.
From the UK.
Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
It was 10 feet from him, and all of a sudden the shot's running out.
People impacted.
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Join us wherever you get your podcast.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra al-Baghir has this report, and this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Let's return now to the death of US civil rights leader Jesse Jackson. Here's more of the landmark speech he gave at the 1988 Democratic National Convention, one of 2 times he attempted to run for president.
I was not born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I had a shovel programmed for my hand. My mother, a working woman. Some of the days she went to work early, with runs in her stockings. She knew better, but she rolled runs in her stockings so that my brother and I could have matching socks and not be laughed at school. I understand. At 3 o'clock on Thanksgiving Day, we couldn't eat turkey because Mama was preparing somebody else's turkey at 3 o'clock. We had to play football to entertain ourselves. And then around 6 o'clock, she would get off the Alta Vista bus and we would bring up the leftovers and eat our turkey, leftovers, the caucus, the cranberries, around 8 o'clock at night. I really do understand. Every one of these funny labels they put on you, those of you who are watching this broadcast tonight in the projects, on the corners, I understand. Call you outcast, low down, you can't make it, you're nothing, you're from nobody, subclass, underclass. When you see Jesse Jackson, when my name goes in nomination, your name goes in nomination. I was born in the slum, but the slum was not born in me. And it wasn't born in you, and you can make it. Wherever you are tonight, you can make it. Hold your head high. Stick your chest out. You can make it. It gets dark sometimes, but the morning comes. Don't you surrender. Suffering breeds character. Character breeds faith. In the end, faith will not disappoint. You must not surrender. You may or may not get there, but just know that you are qualified and you hold on and hold out. We must never surrender. America will get better and better. Keep hope alive.
Jesse Jackson there. Well, let's bring in Pastor Jamal Bryant from the New Birth Missionary Baptist Church, who was a friend of Jesse Jackson. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program. We're just watching him there at the 1988 DNC. Incredibly charismatic orator. The raw emotion from all of the people sitting in the audience listening to him talk about his past and why he was standing there in that moment.
To make the nation better and brighter. For our generation, it was the closest we got to Martin Luther King Jr. To see somebody fighting for dignity and humanity was awe-inspiring. Very rarely in America do they affix the term a patriot to somebody who was Black. But Jesse Jackson was a great patriot because he believed in the best in America.
And of course, tonight and throughout the day, we've been hearing a lot about the kind of political figure he was and the kind of legacy he left on the United States and the world. But how do you remember him as a friend?
I remember him really as a mentor, somebody who always believed in the next generation and poured into it. He believed that the spark of any change or revolution happened with young people, and he did it not just in words, but really in actions. I'm grateful that he's walked with me for the balance of my entire adult life, always opening doors and extending stages to young people who were in the fight for dignity and civil rights.
And he has also been described today as a bridge between generations. Just talk us through that and how he's helped the current generation with their political activism and their understanding of what they're taking on today versus what Jesse Jackson took on during the civil rights movement and the years after that.
To see footage from the Dr. King civil rights movement, they were all in suits and were always closely shaved. And then Jesse Jackson came onto the scene with an afro and a dashiki and a locket, lifting up a fist in his hand. He really ushered in large measure the hip-hop generation, the hip-hop civil rights era. And so he was a bridge for so many who were trying to find their footing and in their placement. Much of the civil rights movement historically came out of the church, but Jesse Jackson opened up a door for people who were coming from the street corners.
And of course, he opened up the door for the likes of Barack Obama, who acknowledged that today. He had his own run at the presidential sort of candidacy in 1984 and 1988. He really sort of laid the groundwork for future political generations as well.
What cannot be underscored enough is Jesse Jackson singularly raised how many people registered to vote from 1984 to 1988. Surfing on his wave of enthusiasm around democracy, Black people became elected mayors in major cities across the country because of his efforts. Those who were otherwise disenfranchised and disengaged became a part of the political system because of his activism.
Dr. Jamal Bryant, thank you so much for joining us here on the program.
I'm honored to be with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, you've been watching The World. We'll leave you tonight with some of the pictures and sounds from Jesse Jackson's extraordinary life. Good night.
I wasn't always on television. Writers were not always outside my door. I know abandonment and people being mean to you and saying you're nothing and nobody and can never be anything. Every one of these funny labels they put on you, call you outcast, low down, you can't make it, you're nothing, you're from nobody, subclass, underclass. I'm a working person's person. That's why I understand you, whether you're black or white, I understand work. I was not born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I had a shovel programmed for my hand. I was born in the slum, but the slum was not born in me. And it wasn't born in you, and you can make it. Wherever you are tonight, you can make it. Hold your head high. Stick your chest out. You can make it. It gets dark sometimes, but the morning comes. America will get better and better. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. On tomorrow night and beyond. Keep hope alive. I love you very much.
Yeah,
that's 20 years ago.
Jesse Jackson, U.S. civil rights leader who's died at the age of 84. His family said in a statement, "Our father was a servant leader, not only to our family, but to the oppressed, the voiceless, and the overlooked." As we've been reporting this evening, in the 1960s, Jackson fought for civil rights alongside Martin Luther King Jr., whose daughter remembers Jackson as a gifted negotiator. Barack Obama paid tribute today as well and said Jesse Jackson was a true giant and he stood on his shoulders in becoming America's first black president. The US President Donald Trump also pays tribute, calling Jesse Jackson a force of nature with lots of personality, grit and street smarts. Well, of course, we'll have much more on the wrap coming up with Gillian in the next few moments. But we will leave you with these images of Reverend Jesse Jackson, who's died at the age of 84. And of course, we have much more coverage as well on our website. But from me and the rest of the team on The World, good night.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.